this Easter Sunday, we're given yet another of the great images of Christianity, of discipleship, of Jesus, our relationship with the Father, our relationship with each other. I am the vine, you are the branches. My Father is the vine grower. In me you will bear much fruit. Like this image of the vineyard. And first, like big picture, as we look at the vineyard, just to realize that putting together a vineyard, that investing in a vineyard, that working a vineyard is not for the faint of heart. That there's so much investment. Every acre of grapes planted. And in that investment, there's a guarantee of no return for several years. And even once the grapes start growing, I was looking online to see about whether it was a good investment to put together a vineyard. And your first good bottle of wine might be 40 years away. That people who plant vineyards are playing the long game. They're investors in but no hedge fund manager will ever buy a vineyard. And so as we look at the Father who has planted a vineyard and us who are branches on his Son, the vine, we can see something about our discipleship, not so much from the perspective of what we are going to do, but what the Father is doing for us. The Father who plays the long game, who invests long term. There are those, I guess, who plant vineyards because they have too much money and they think it will be very beautiful and wonderful. And it's a great tax write-off because they lose money every year on their vineyard business. But this isn't God's plan. God's plan for us is fruitfulness. And it's a plan that's willing to wait out the dry years, that's willing to build the protective barriers, that's willing to create the support for the vines, that's willing to water and hoe and weed, that's willing ultimately to sit out the fallow years, that's willing to pick all of the fruit once we bear the fruit that has been given to us by the same vine grower, by the Father, connected to the vine. So this story of what God is willing to do for us, how much God is willing to invest in us, God who's willing to play the long game for us. That's the story of the vineyard, of God, our Father, who is the vine grower, of Jesus, who is the vine. And it's a story of relationship and connection to God, who is making this great work, to his Son Jesus, to whom we're connected as the vine, who connects us back to the Father, to one another, connected in the same vine. That sometimes these relationships and these connections, that's all we're called to do, is to not get cut off, to remain connected to the vine. An act of love and humility may be difficult at times because we'll see those protective barriers as some sort of limitation, because we'll see the supports for the vine as some sort of constraint, because we'll see the pruning as some sort of pain. But invited to allow God's work to be accomplished in us so that we can bear fruit. And that brings me to a very particular point of this gospel that I learned many years ago now, almost a quarter of a century ago, when I spent 6 weeks in the Holy Land. And I remember one day we were at Tantur, which is an estate owned by the Vatican but managed by Notre Dame, between Bethlehem and Jerusalem. And we were living there. And the gardener took me out one day and he said, I want you to see this. And he showed me their vineyard, a very small vineyard, but their grapevines. And there was something particular about them that forever changes how I think of this gospel. In the second verse, Jesus says in our typical translations, whoever does not bear fruit, I will take away or throw away. The Greek verb is airo. Now, that verb is usually translated to lift up. So Jesus lifted up on the cross, the bronze serpent that was lifted up, that's always airo, to lift up, to raise up. But that didn't make sense here, right? Why would you lift up branches that aren't bearing fruit? So we almost all the translations go with the secondary translation of to lift away or to throw out. And so that's our translation, and it makes it very complicated and hard to understand in light of the rest of the gospel. But when I saw these vines growing in an area where there is no rain during the season of grapes, and so they collect the dew each day, and they do this by trellising the vines about a foot off the ground, trellised where the dew will collect on the vines and drip down to water the plants. And so if your vines are trellised a foot off the ground, as all of the vines would have been in Jesus's time, and the vine grower has done this work to trellis and support these vines, the ones that don't bear fruit are the ones that have fallen off the trellis and made their way to the ground and are now unable to bear fruit because they're running along the ground, and the vine grower will come and lift them up and re-trellis them into the trellis. And I love this image mostly because then it's even more clear that this is God's work. He says a few verses later that those who are disconnected from the vine, now they're going to dry up, they're going to get collected and thrown out, different verb, and burned. So we do have this one job, stay connected to the vine, which means that our pride is going to get in the way. It means that our narcissism is going to get in the way. If we think that we can just stick ourselves into the soil and grow our own roots and grow our own fruit, we are going to dry up and be collected and thrown over the fence and burned. But whether we're weak or we're strong, if we stay connected and we're weak and we fall into the ground, the vine grower will come and lift us up and re-trellis us. And if we're strong and bearing fruit, we're going to get pruned and we're going to bear more fruit. And this is all God's work for us. Our discipleship, which is primarily the efforts of our Father in heaven, and the connection of the body of Christ, of Jesus, the true vine, we the branches, our Father in heaven, the vine grower.